Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong. I'm Asbed Bedrossian, here with Hovik Manucharyan. In this Conversations on Groong episode, we'll be talking about the internet censorship bill proposed in Armenia before the new year. And we'll also talk about the threat and activity of some cyber security software, malware in Armenia, such as the Israeli Pegasus and other software, which represents a threat to journalists and freedom of expression. This episode today is February 24, 2023. Now, to talk about these issues and topics with us, we are joined by Artur Papyan, who is a malware researcher, digital security consultant, co-founder of CyberHub, and a director of Media Diversity Institute. Welcome back to our show, Artur. It's great to talk with you.
It's great to be with you. Thank you.
Artur, let's begin by some concerning news in the legislative sphere. On December 22, 2022, the Armenian Ministry of Justice caused a big commotion among media companies in the community by publishing a proposal for legislative changes that would effectively allow the government to censor the internet completely or partially in the event of martial law. And the deadline for submitting comments was Armenian Christmas, January 6, 2023, which is just 10 days after the initial posting of that request for comments. This is not the first time that Pashinyan's government has sought power to censor the press and information flow to the people. If you recall, back in, I think, July 2022, outgoing Prosecutor General Artur Papyan essentially, as a parting blow to the people, recommended that the government enact such a law. And anyway, the proposal was slammed by international watchdogs such as the Committee to Protect Journalists and even the Armenian government's ombudswoman at that time, Christina Grigoryan. And the Armenian Union of Journalists also deplored the proposal and strongly urged the government to rework it. The CPJ did not mince its words, and they said that the Armenian authorities should not use military conflicts as an excuse to curtail press freedom. And obviously, the organization that you're involved in, I believe, Artur, was also sort of, and you yourself were vocally critical of these proposals. So, normally, in my opinion, such major changes require a lot of consultation with stakeholders and basically getting the public buy-in. Were such consultations held ahead of time for this newest proposal?
No, they weren't. Just to add you that, in fact, there was a group of media organizations, not just the Journalist Union, but a group of about 10, including my organization, which voiced strong concerns. And we contacted also international organizations like the CPJ and drew their attention to that. The problems that we saw is the following. So basically, the current situation is pretty bad. Basically, when the websites were blocked in 2020, and some websites were blocked, including like TikTok social network was blocked on September 13, 2022. My organization, Media Diversity Institute, which is a media and internet freedom watchdog, we submitted letters, freedom of information requests to the National Security Service, and we asked them to clarify with what laws, or according to which legislation they were blocking websites, because we were unable to find any law that would allow the National Security Service to basically, or anybody else for that matter, to block internet access. And we specifically said that we are not complaining about anything. We just want to understand what's the procedure. Because what we discovered was that many Azerbaijani news websites were blocked, many Turkish websites were blocked, TikTok was blocked. Yet, for example, Telegram, which was the biggest perhaps source of misinformation, scaremongering, etc., on the Armenian newssphere, it wasn't blocked. So we really wanted, as media experts, as freedom of speech campaigners, as internet freedom campaigners, we wanted to understand what's the procedure, how is this happening? The first response that we got to our letter in 2022 was basically about nothing. National Security Service didn't deny that they blocked anything. Although from our conversations with our sources, we knew that it's not the initiative, for example, of the telecoms. They were instructed to somehow do that. But they didn't deny that they instructed this, but they didn't say any rational. When we did a more targeted question the second time, we were like, why these websites were blocked and why others weren't? They responded in a more strange manner. They basically said that they have the authority to oversee internet and electronic telecommunications. That was the first thesis. And the second one was that currently certain steps are undertaken to bring the legislation more in line with the requirements. Basically, to translate this into human speak, the National Security Service confessed that they mandated the blockage, and that they understood that the current legislation does not allow them to do any internet blockages, and that they basically confessed that they were behind this change of legislation. And we sort of knew that this is the case because when we were trying to look for who initiated this legislative change, we discovered that nobody wanted to take up the task. Basically, we had the opinion that the law was, initiated by National Security Service. Somebody instructed the Ministry of Justice to take it on and run with it. This is also why they couldn't really, in a more articulate manner, explain to us why they wanted to block it. And we tie this to also general prosecutors' earlier attempts to bring children into this matter, because, it always starts like this, protect the children, because you don't want your children to be hurt, right? So you need to have a tool to block internet to protect the children. But then, you protect children, then you shut up those who don't agree with you, and that's how everything starts. That's like we have seen this 100 times in many other places.
So just to clarify, when did you contact the National Security Service in 2022 about this?
Literally, I think our letter was, I wrote the letter, I think it was dated 17th September 2022.
Okay.
Generally, like anytime we see a blockage, because we have an infrastructure which monitors key websites in Armenia, like we run the scans about 10,000 times a day. And when we see a blockage, we usually take action. We try to clarify, ask people who are on the know, and then we send letters of freedom of information to find out.
So it's interesting because this new proposal, my understanding of it is that it only applies during times of military, I guess, what is it called, martial law.
Yes.
So I guess that wouldn't address the situation that you were observing at that time. I guess, should we be worried about future changes as well? I'm not sure. Or
yeah, basically on September 13th, there was no martial law no declaration of martial law or anything, but still some websites were closed. And our concern with media organizations is that once they create the infrastructure to block stuff, which is, from what I understand, first you create the law, then you create the technical means to make sure that this law can be enacted. And then once the infrastructure is there, once you have the tool, then anybody in the National Security Service can receive a direct order and just shut it down, whatever they need. First they do in martial law, then they will do when it's another wave of COVID, then they will do when there's like some opposition is really close to seizing power, or like election changes are upcoming. And that's where the danger is. We know that power corrupts.
So what's the current status of this bill?
Basically, after the fuss that we made with media NGOs and watchdogs and campaigners, they called us to the Ministry of Justice to do another discussion. We had pretty frank exchange of opinions with stakeholders. We presented our concerns. But what we understood is that they're going to try to make some changes as we proposed. We were trying to say that at least make sure there's some transparency procedures in the law, at least create some sort of a collegiate body which more transparently, decides, records the decisions, make this, at least even if it's secret, keeps it there, and then make sure that after the military rule is over, then this can be opened up and the public can know why these specific websites was blocked. Of course, we think that this law just should be abolished altogether, but if they're going to pursue with it, at least try to put some controls in place. And we also talk to some more friendly lawmakers to make sure that once the bill reaches Parliament, we have more action. Like we will try to work with them more closely. And we're trying to look at international cases, legislation in other countries to try to understand what's more reasonable, how to protect against, oppressing the freedom of speech, and only make sure that this can be used in, for example, suppressing fakes, disinformation, for example, from Azerbaijan, etc., and not be turned against the political dissent.
Arthur, is your impression that the ruling party is completely unified behind enacting this proposed bill?
No, not at all. In fact, well, the lawmakers which have agreed to and have actually championed some of the points that we were making are from the ruling party. That's why also I guess that I have a feeling that this was actually an initiative by the National Security Service, which means that this was somehow directly or indirectly ordered by Pashinyan, the prime minister.
That was going to be my question exactly. If we can drill down a little bit deeper, how if there is no unity, how big is support still for civil society, for free speech in the Pashinyan, I guess, and the members of these civil contract coalition in parliament? It seems like they always vote in unison, but maybe privately there are some who diverge in their opinion, but still are not able to cast the votes that to prove their divergence. So, what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I don't even find it very useful to discuss this, because the facts are, they talk to us, for example, in 2020 when it was the COVID, restrictions being put in place. In private conversations, in talks with civil society, some lawmakers would say, yeah, this is stupid. Like, for example, the restrictions that were put place on March 16th. But then they went and voted in favor of whatever Pashinyan wanted to. So it's not even like, what's the point if some of them, or if they're not so uniform in their support, if in the end they're going to go and vote for it? We have to take it for what it is. Like, the civil contract party is a one-man party. That's what it is. And this needs to be changed, preferably in free and fair elections. So we'll see how this works out in the next cycle. What is important is that up until recently, civil society generally was willing to give Pashinyan's government some leeway to act, thinking that, okay, they're not inexperienced, they just came to power, etc. But we can see that there is mounting criticism now from civil society against the Pashinyan government's unpopular decisions, undemocratic actions, and attempts to solidify power. And this is very important from my perspective, because in 2018, this wave was not possible, wouldn't be possible of power change without the actions of the civil society. Civil society thought that they were genuinely, doing a revolution, but I guess what happened was just a power change. And that's sad, but this is an experience that we, I guess, had to see to understand what the next steps should be for our country.
So as you mentioned, Arthur, the current government does not tolerate criticism, and as we see, obviously, as well. But one recent event corroborated this observation, which is 2 weeks ago when Armenia was downgraded in the Transparency International 2022 Corruption Perception Index ranking. And Pashinyan, out of all the excuses, he blamed the Armenian media for that. Why, in your opinion, is this government so preoccupied with information censorship, primarily to its own people?
I guess this has to do with the fact that Pashinyan himself used to be a journalist. He knows and understands the value of information. He's also a populist, which means that he really cares about what people think. And he's, I dare say, the kind of journalist who doesn't believe in genuine, objective journalists, because his words, that's what his words tell us. He talks about journalists being killers, about journalists being corrupt, using all this fake news rhetoric that we've seen in other populists, basically. Uh, when he keeps talking about this so much, you understand that he doesn't accept that there could be a reality when media would genuinely report for the public good. And that's why he sees that his preoccupation to make sure that journalists are on his side or they shut up, because then what he cares is that people should love him and that he should control the information and affect everybody else. Maybe there are other explanations, but those are mine because I am myself a former journalist, and I feel that in this part we have a more or less similar understanding of what media can actually do.
Do you know anything about the use of Telegram in terms of drug dealing? I mean, is this something worth spending a few minutes to talk about today, or?
I mean, there is genuine crime going on in Telegram. And the problem is, yes, we know there's drug dealing with Telegram happening, but also, for example, opposition is using Telegram, news media are using Telegram. Telegram is a major source of information.
Actually, Arthur, one thing that we've been interested is the government doing anything about this crime, not necessarily from the perspective of blocking Telegram or something, but apparently there's it's almost like an epidemic in Yerevan that there are kids dying from drugs that they procured from Telegram. Is the government actually laying mines for these operations?
I think so, because we have been getting several reports. One literally, I think, a week ago, or even a couple of days ago, I saw another report. The government is catching the distributors. They're trying to infiltrate those Telegram networks. And this is important. As long as the government is doing actual police work, I mean, they're joining networks, they're pretending to be buyers, getting those people. This is legit and this should be done. What I'm concerned about is that because Telegram is a very, very important source of information, I hope that this doesn't lead to a place when government says we need to control Telegram more or block it or have some sort of an agreement with Telegram to get more monitoring access. Because then, while trying to solve the legitimate issues, they could also, with another hand, get to the same point, which is trying to have more control over dissidents, critics, independent media. So I really hope that this only lives where it is, police doing police work, actual police work on the ground to catch criminals, and not trying to blanket, to surveillance or monitor citizens or block freedom of speech just because there's also a couple of drug dealers there.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about more tech stuff. So the NGO, one of the NGOs you're part of, CyberHub, has made announcements recently that hundreds of Armenian journalists, politicians, and even civil servants were targets of malicious activity with programs such as Pegasus and Predator. Can you give us a brief overview of what is happening and why this warning was released? As we know, both Pegasus and Predator were used against Armenians in the past. Is there a marked increase in terms of targeting, and what else can you tell us about these two tools?
Much of what I know should not be disclosed at this moment because we're still researching the topic. What I can tell you is mostly public information, and the public information is the following: that starting from 2020, we have seen several waves when tech giants like Google, Microsoft, and Apple especially have been coming out with statements and research and reports about the fact that there's some sort of malware infrastructure, Pegasus infrastructure, attacking infrastructure operating in or against Armenians. There were consecutive research. It was especially more bothering when Apple started directly sending messages, iMessages, and emails to users of iPhone devices, iOS devices. And those messages were telling people that basically you have been targeted by state-sponsored attacks. And then Apple would usually provide some sort of guidance of how to proceed. And sometimes this guidance included talking to human rights organizations, international ones, including Access Now, which is our partner organization. And after that, people did go to Access Now, some of them, and were, of course, referred back to us because we are the people working with Access Now inside Armenia, or some knew us and just directly approached us. There's also a colleague of us, Ruben Muradyan, who is not part of our team, but we share information, work together, discuss some professional matters once in a while, here and there. So together, we did some research, Ruben did some research, and we revealed a lot of cases of Pegasus. I'm not ready to name the numbers yet. We can know that in each time when Apple sent out such notifications, dozens of people received that. So the numbers would be in the hundreds. We also know that because Google is a more open infrastructure, Google Android devices, Google doesn't have such a tight control over the operating system. So they do not know so well what traffic went by their Android devices. So there's probably even more people affected with Android devices, but it's just not possible to know this.
From my understanding in discussing this with other colleagues, it seems that yes, the Google has pretty good controls, to give them credit on their Pixel devices, but a majority of the Android devices in Armenia are inexpensive and Chinese sort of versions, which do not have those same security controls. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So if it's a modified Redmi or OnePlus device, or even a Samsung, like Google would probably not have such a tight control over it. It does sometimes. We have seen cases when Google sent notifications about state-sponsored attacks against Google accounts. This is something that Google would know. But other than that, we can be pretty sure that also many Android devices were attacked, but we just have no way of really testing that. Our tests have revealed that there are many state or government employees who have been targeted. Some of them are people who know information about military, educational system, health system, which is, and some people have actually publicly spoken about this. So this tells us that most definitely Azerbaijan is one of the parties who is using such cyber weapons against Armenians. But the nature of attacks is such that in many cases, we have seen that opposition figures have been targeted, or journalists or human rights defenders. So there is every reason that the Armenian government could also be using such cyber weapons. We know that Pegasus and Predator both have been used in Armenia. So there's every reason to believe that, for example, Azerbaijani government might have been using Pegasus and Armenians might have been using Predator, or vice versa. I'm not ready to reveal and substantiate this yet because we have facts, but we're still researching it. And
on that point, certain security analysts argue that because the Israeli company NSO Group, which sells Pegasus, usually restricts usage, or at least they claim to the territory of the government that acquired the solution, this must mean that essentially the Armenian government could be the only licensee of such usage on Armenian territory, especially since it's so wide, apparently widespread. I know you mentioned, you're not ready to, but what else? Is there something you can tell us about any evidence of Armenian government's overt or covert programs to target citizens with such tools? Maybe something in the public domain already.
Well, first, I guess I have to say something about who NSO Group sells to. there are publicly published reports that, for example, Morocco's government mandated usage of Pegasus against France's president. Well, or so, I mean, this sort of blows out this whole idea of who NSO really targets and who doesn't. And we know that Apple has actually taken NSO Group to court because of concerns of how it is using this software, because it's supposed to be used against criminals and terrorists and not against interstate sabotage, cross-border, espionage, or against your dissidents. We know that also there are some Azerbaijani activists living in other countries who have been targeted with Pegasus. So definitely Azerbaijani authorities have been caught red-handed using it against people in even outside of Azerbaijan. I mean, we cannot, say that this is definitely not Azerbaijan. On the contrary, I guess, judging from what we know. Also, there is another research recently published by Checkpoint, which directly indicates that Azerbaijani sponsored software malware is actually used inside Armenia, and it has been even geofenced to specifically target Armenian infrastructure.
Yeah.
I mean, this leads me to believe that Azerbaijan is very much keen to employ various cyber tools against Armenia for espionage purposes. As for the usage by Armenian government against its citizens, I don't have definitive evidence yet which I can publicize, but I have every reason to believe that Armenians would be very much tempted by the functionality like Pegasus or Predator. Especially, we have seen some indicators and signs that this has been used in 2021, just before the elections, which makes every sense. But let's have a more, research, get the facts, and then publicize approach, because I don't want to be wrong about something as big as that.
Right.
Artur, we've been talking about Pegasus and Predator. What's the difference between these two?
Well, not to go into big details, but basically, one thing to know is NSO Group's Pegasus software mostly relies on 0 days, which means your device can be compromised without you doing anything at all. Whereas Predator is known
even after you've installed all the patches, or
even if you have all the patches, fully secured your iPhone, it can still be compromised by Pegasus, because that's their biggest selling point. Like, they attack their infrastructure, attacks the target using 0 days, which means that even Apple might not know that they have a weak point. So there's basically nothing you can do to protect, except just,
So all they need is basically your phone number, and that's it.
Yeah, basically it's your phone number. And from what we know so far, the attacks usually come in the form of a WhatsApp message or iMessage.
Yeah, on that note, I just want to sort of, there are such things as 0-click 0 days, which essentially you might even not know that you got a message. You would need to interact with your phone. So those are the most expensive and those are the most dangerous, and Pegasus definitely has those. But there's also cases for 0 days where you have to interact. You might have to click on a link, or you might have to then follow up with some additional activity. So I think it's worth differentiating between those two.
Yes,
cases.
It's important, especially to differentiate, because Predator, unlike Pegasus, works with, from what we know so far, mostly by clicking. I mean, you have to somehow manipulate a link or open it up. It's important to also note that iOS now has a special function called lockdown mode, which was, from what I know, introduced specifically to fight Pegasus or such non-click, 0 days. So what it does is basically it blocks any type of link previews, thumbnails, or image previews from opening in your iMessage and email attachments, etc. Because one of the ways that those things infect is when a picture arrives to you, for example, even before you see it, your iMessage tries to go and see what the hell has arrived to generate a preview of it. And when it tries to fetch this image or go to a website to grab the website's basic HTML code, it can have some obfuscated code or extra code which leverages a 0-day to drop a special, malware, which then will bring the rest of the whole malicious load and take over the device. So by using this lockdown mode, basically you're much more safe, even though I think I know about some cases when even lockdown doesn't protect full evidence. We have actually directly contacted Apple, and we're working also with Citizen Lab to investigate such case to understand if we're right or not, because we're not 100% sure. And again, I don't want to go into much more detail because this will be published when the full research is over.
So how does someone detect whether they have either Pegasus or Predator or one of these malwares on their phones? Is there a way of me, a regular person, checking my phone?
The whole point is that you don't. The whole point is that if you understand that you are a potential target and you're just really, really careful, you don't keep any important information in your phone, because after attacking your device, after getting hold of it, basically the operator has the ability to, get content from your phone, contact lists, even try to access the encrypted password vault and try to download passwords, or if you have the habit of saving them. Yeah. So basically, if it's a public phone number which is associated with your name, there is not much you can do except maybe not have a smartphone, and or have another number which is not directly associated with your name, where you keep your smartphone related stuff. I mean, it's more a common sense approach and trying to really evaluate your risks. If you are a person of high risks, then you should really consider what you keep on that phone, because that's very, very dangerous.
Yeah, yeah. I went through a couple of pages by Amnesty International, basically to review what they had done, some of their advice and everything. And I actually played with the software that they had created
Yeah,
and
mobile
went through
verification
my
toolkit.
backups and this tool they call MVT and stuff. Well, all I can say is don't expect your mother to be able to do it. So,
Yeah, actually, there are, like, for more common users, maybe they can use something called iMazing.
mhm.
This is a special software which has integrated some of the mobile verification toolkit that Amnesty have created. And by the way, Amnesty Tech are perhaps a fantastic team who have developed a software which allows you to test this software. Another great team that does this work is Citizen Lab. So we are in contact with both of those labs in trying to investigate the attacks in Armenia. And yes, mobile verification toolkit is not for your average, like grandmother, but iMazing's tool, which allows to back up your software. Even the free version will also allow you to pretty easily, like, click and press and interface, just do a quick scan. It's not 100% accurate. It's not very up to date, but it does some of the job.
Good.
And some
Well, we'll
people
put a
might
couple
want
of
to have
links in
it.
our show notes also
Yeah,
for
yeah.
people. Great.
And just as a sort of to make sure that we don't make people panic completely, because yes, in some cases it's very if, for instance, in order for you to be exploited by a completely unknown 0-day without any clicks, that costs the costs for that are very high, and you would have to be a very high value target in order for NSO group essentially to burn that knowledge, to burn the 0-day, which would mean that it's no longer a 0-day. So other than those 0-click 0-days, the standard advice, such as, don't click on links that you're not, familiar with, suspicious links, don't install apps that are sort of not from the App Store. I think those are all like standard security guidance that is also very common sense that you should, like, as Artur said, you should follow. But and you can sort of be the new, I guess, lockdown mode from Apple is also useful, but it's not a panacea. So you should always be careful about what you're using your phone for, and I think that's the basic advice. But it's not complete helplessness, because I don't feel that the Azeri government or anyone, or even the Armenian government, would spend millions of dollars to compromise me. But maybe if I'm like the topmost opposition politician, or someone with military value, the foreign governments might be interested in that. I don't know. What do you think, Arthur?
I agree 100%. I mean, if you feel that you are a target, just really carefully review what you have on that phone. And from some of price estimations we've seen is that Pegasus license would cost several millions of dollars. There is some published information about how CIA tested Pegasus for a short time, just to see whether they need this tool. And as far as I recall the report, it said the US government paid $5 million just to take a test version. So imagine what it would cost for a real operational system, which in case of Armenia, we see that with dozens of targets, but dozens of really high value people work with very important information. We haven't seen any regular person being targeted. This is all really people who have top level contacts or very important information.
Sounds good. Okay, and to close off our discussion today, you mentioned the company Checkpoint, which recently released a warning to users in Armenia about a new malware that is targeting users. And I believe that warning was blaming, or essentially was alluding that there's a nation state actor at play, and that the attack is geofenced to Armenia. What else can you tell us about this? Is your organization involved in researching this?
Well, I mean, involved sounds too proud. Basically, yes, we were contacted by Checkpoint, and we did confirm and check some things for them. But the whole credit goes to Checkpoint, of course. A fantastic team there. And it's important, especially, to understand that this is the first time that Armenian and Israeli cybersecurity specialists did some research together. Especially, this is interesting because we know that Azerbaijan has very good cooperation with Israelis in drones, even in the fields of cybersecurity,
in the defense,
as far as I understand, defense industry. Yet, when Checkpoint saw this malware, which was targeting civilian infrastructure, it was targeting Artsakh Bank, for example, trying to make use of the name of Alexander Lapshin, a blogger who is really, really friendly to Armenians, who has actually sat in an Israeli jail, then took in an Azerbaijani jail, then took Azerbaijan's government to court, to European Court of Justice, and then won the case. So basically, the attackers have used this story to target Artsakh Bank by sending an email on behalf of Lapshin. And Checkpoint has detected this, and they really saw this through, researched the issue, and issued the warning. And I'm really happy that we saw this, and I'm happy that it's especially like a third party, an Israeli company, talking about this. It's not just us, because that is verifiable facts from reputable researchers. And it's important to have such information at hand, because Red Cross last year literally again said that using cyber weapons against civilian infrastructure, this is against the international humanitarian law, and this is important to have such facts in place. This is also the case with Pegasus. That's why we're researching it. That's also why we're researching it, not just because it's generally bad, but we also want to make sure that we have the facts right, which, I mean, should be used, and this cannot be tolerated.
Yeah, just for our listeners, the name of the malware is called 0xTA rat for remote access Trojan, or I guess Oxtarat. I don't know how you pronounce it, but we'll put a link in the show notes for that as well. All right. Anything else? Anything else to add, Arthur, about what we talked about today?
I mean, this is a dangerous world we're living in, and very very difficult years, starting from, I guess, COVID years or even earlier, since the 1918s, 2018. So I really want everybody to be vigilant and be very careful in cyber matters, in handling sensitive information, in securing their devices. Just don't be careless. Internet is not like, even though you're sitting home and accessing internet, that doesn't mean you're actually sitting home, because your device is a window to a super highway where everybody is out to catch you. So, I mean, just be warned. You're endangering not just yourself, but everybody else in this tiny little country, which we care so much about.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, Arthur. And we appreciate all the work that you do. And we hope to have you in the future as well to talk about these issues and more.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for your time.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Arthur.
That concludes this Conversations on Groong episode, and we hope you found it useful. As always, we invite your feedback. You can find us on most social media and podcast platforms or our website, groong.org. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, like our pages, and follow us on social media. On behalf of everyone in this episode, we wish you a good week. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.